Welcome to Keiser Voices, the story of success, brought to you by Keiser University Graduate School, here where the academic world meets personal triumph. Join us today as we dive into the captivating tales of success.
So excited to have you back for another episode of Keiser Voices. With us today, we're so excited to have another one of our fabulous students joining us as we talk about Black History Month. So with us today is Ceandra Dilley. She's one of our PhD in Industrial and Organizational Psychology students, joining us from Wake Forest, North Carolina. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. This is so exciting. I'm like, oh, it's official.
It is. And so we're going to get to it because I have a lot of questions and we have limited time and I really want to hear about you. So I want to set it off talking about you, but also talking about why we're having this conversation today. So can you share a personal story or experience about the importance of recognizing history months, whether it is Hispanic heritage, we have Women's History Month, we have Mental Health Month, but most importantly, like I said before, we're here talking about Black History Month. So how's that important to you and where does that factor into your personal story?
Absolutely. So this is going to be very interesting. So I'm prior military. I'm a retired Navy veteran, and I've lived over the entire globe. I've been on every continent except 3. And when I was living in Italy, we had a holiday. I believe it was like maybe Labor Day or Veterans Day. I can't quite remember. But I remember the Italian nationals. They said, what is this holiday and why do you celebrate it, right? And it was interesting because a lot of Americans could not even tell them why we were celebrating the holidays. They were simply like, oh, it's just a day off. Oh, it's just a day where we're going to go and shop. And it really just knocked my socks off. I was like, this isn't it, right? And so that made me really just kind of take an interest. Now, I know why we have our holidays and then how they came about and all of that stuff. I love history, right? But to know that there were other fellow Americans, not only just fellow Americans, but there were other sailors and soldiers and airmen, right, that didn't really know why. And they could not explain to these Italian nationals, like why we do what we do and why we celebrate what we celebrate and why it means what it means. And so, of course, Black history for me is near and dear to my heart, right? It's about the struggles of our people, right? Overcoming, being able to integrate and also just to really kind of bring about that diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? That we hear a lot of right now, right? Since COVID's happened and all that kind of stuff. And so with that being said, I was like, it's going to be really, really important that we educate not only just our children and our families, but even like our coworkers and those that are around us, because truly sometimes people, they don't know, right? And they just are just kind of just out there like, oh, it's just another holiday to shop or whatever the case may be. And so for me, it's imperative that we are able to educate so that people will not forget, right? Why we do what we do and why we celebrate what we celebrate.
Well, thank you for your service, first and foremost.
Very well.
I appreciate the sacrifice that you and your family, because it is also the family. So thank you so much for what you've done for this country. Interestingly enough, I interviewed on a previous episode a student and I asked her the same question. And what she had explained to me is one day she realized, let me look into the topic of Black History Month. I've never spoken about it. We've never had that conversation. And what she came to look back and realize is that conversation never happened at home. It never happened amongst the family. Is that the same for you, or did you grow up having those conversations already?
We did. We actually grew up having those conversations. I'm so lucky that my family, they were very good historians. And so they kept records, right? Very just copious records, right? And very in-depth in detail from way, way back when, before I was even thought about, right? Of our grandfathers and great-great-grandfathers and all the great times, all of that, right? And with that being shown, seeing how census and things of that nature were kept and who was living where and where I literally came from, we had those conversations. And so when we have our family reunions, right, we bring out this book, right, and we educate, right, our nieces and nephews and children and grandchildren, all that, so that they never forget. I'm from a little small town in Live Oak, Florida, and if you drive, you'll just blink your eyes, you'll go right there. It's a small town, right? But in our town, my family, they were farmers, right? We own over 300 plus acres of land, and on that land, we were able to bring produce and things of that nature, and we sold it to our grocery stores and things of that nature. So it was a community, right? And I saw how key my family played a part in that. And so for us, history was always a very important aspect of our lives, because even now my uncles and my father, they never want us to forget, because there's a legacy, right, that my grandfather had to fight for, right? Blood, sweat, and tears, for the family, literally, right? And so he wanted to really make that impression upon us that you must know where you've been, right? So that way you can know where you're going. And so we actually studied the history. And I believe I know the young lady that you're talking about, because we're friends, and she was mentioning that. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting. But now I'm glad that, we're having this conversation, that Keiser's allowing this to come forth, and you guys are doing an amazing job with these stories. And now she's researching it, right? And now she can change, right? And now she can begin to educate her families on Black history as well.
Yeah, no, it's definitely been a journey of discovery for not only for those of us listening in to these conversations, but also it sounds like it's a personal journey. So when you were being educated by your family, maybe it's your family stories or maybe other influential people, were there any, maybe specific people or figures in this history? Again, it could be your own families or, maybe somebody surrounding your family that really inspired or changed your perspective. And if you could tell me who they were, maybe a little bit about them.
Absolutely. So there's this little girl. I remember watching a video, and it was during the time, civil activists and all that kind of stuff, and trying to change laws and make things fair for everyone. And her name was Ayana, and I'm probably going to mess up her last name. Ayana Numajo, something like that, right? But she was 7 years old. Right. And on the side, right, I do substitute teaching. And so because I'm a helicopter mom, right? So my kids there, I got to be there. Right. So I do substitute teaching for fun. It's really for fun. I love the kids. And I was in a classroom, and these were 6-year-olds and 7-year-olds. And this was so prevalent now for this time, because I pulled up the same video in which I had watched to share with them. And this was a little girl, right, with a big voice, right? The presence, right? Actually, when they went in to sit at the lunch counters, because they were trying to integrate the restaurants, right? And this little girl and these other children, right? They sat at these lunch counters and they were peaceful. They asked to purchase a meal. Of course, they weren't served, right? And so they had to keep coming back day after day, right? And eventually, of course, they were served, right? And these lunch counters, these restaurants, they were integrated. But this little girl, like I said, she was little, but she had a big voice. That made a huge impression upon me, and I've never forgotten her. And even looking at her story back then, but seeing how even now, right, we can still be 6 or 7 years old, but we can still have a big voice. So I tell the students, right, no matter what, your voice matters. My voice matters even as an adult. But one person can change the face of a nation. One person can change the face of history. And that little girl on that day, with other little boys and girls as well, right? They stood together in arms, and they changed the world. And so she stands out to me first and foremost out of anyone, because I now have a 7-year-old, right? And so I allow him and let him know to say, hey, you have a voice and you have to use it, because eventually all the ears that aren't listening, there's going to be some ears that do listen. And when they do listen, you guys will be able to affect change and make life better. And this is how it starts. It starts with you, and it starts with me.
Wow. 7?
7.
I'm going to have to look that up, because I have not heard that story. And that goes back to having the conversations, right? So we can share the stories and share the histories and have a respect of history, period.
Absolutely.
But are there, again, and this is in your opinion, are there ways that are more effective than others, or maybe a specific way that is truly effective that we can engage and truly honor Black History Month, either, personally or even within a community? How would you, or how would any of us go about it? What's the right track?
Yeah. It's different for many people, right? For me and my family, it's about getting out into the community, right? Supporting these businesses, right? Whether they're Black owned, whether they're white owned, Hispanic, whatever the case may be, it's showing that whole diversity, equity, and inclusion to patron all the businesses, right? We are an American people. We are one, right? We are one for the other, right? And I know there's some hard heads out there, right? They want to go all right and do their own thing. But for the most part, and for the masses, right? We saw this country come together in 2011, right? When that happened, 9/11, and we came together as family, as a community, as how we should have been, right? And so the same thing here for Black History Month. going out, educating people, having these types of dialogues and discussion, right? So that people can truly understand. Going back now and even watching those videos, right? Reading those books, right? To be able to educate our children, our children's children, and even strangers, right? I can go to a restaurant, sit down, have a conversation, and I'm always striking up conversation, right? My husband goes, you'll talk to anybody, right? I'm like, I know, we're all people, we're all family, right? But striking up those conversations like, hey, you guys, it's Black History Month. Can you tell me what you know? Just little things like that, just to spark a conversation and to get it going and to get people thinking, and then asking them like what happened in those eras, right? And I always tell the children, even on today, because I was subbing today before getting on this interview, and I was telling the children even then, I say, a lot of people want us to be segregated. There's people out there that they're just meanies, right? They're just meanies. But at the end of the day, you have to realize it wasn't only Black people, right, coming in for the integration. There were white people as well. And I had to make the kids understand that there's no one race of people that's good or bad. We are all people, right? And there's good and bad in every race. So for one, don't let anybody allow or make you believe that you're worse than another race, because that is so not true. And showing them the videos and talking about it and saying, you see, these are Black people, these are white people. They came together for the human race, not for color, but for the human race, for the greater good. So I think if we continue to have those open dialogues and people meet it with objectivity and not coming in with their own biases, right? Because sometimes that can kind of get us into trouble. I think it will open up things. One of the things that I've done here in my community, because I'm originally from Florida, but we live in North Carolina now. And when we first got here, it was during COVID. And one of our neighbors there, it was like these 70 and 80-year-olds. I love these senior citizens, right? And they were so kind and so nice. And they invited me over for a tea party. It was the best, right? And they said, hey, can we just talk with you, right? Because the era in which they grew up and lived, it was that segregation, right? And so they wanted to have a dialogue, and I was honored, right? I learned about their stories and how some had never even seen Black people, or maybe some were their nannies and things of that nature, and how they weren't allowed to play with. It's real life and these real women talking. And it taught me so much, and seeing them now, right? And seeing how the world has shifted all around them and how they've had to kind of change paradigms and mindsets. It was like so exhilarating and refreshing that I could sit down with people that lived in that era and learn how they were and now how they are, right? Because they were children during that time, one of the ladies said, and she goes, I just didn't know why I couldn't play with Black kids. My dad just said, we just can't, And so they did it because that was it. That's what their dad said, right? And you mind your manners and you do what your dad says, So some of that kind of stuff. So a lot of just miseducation, and sometimes people just didn't know. And maybe they were in areas where they weren't even surrounded by other cultures and races and things as such. But it was a blessing to me. So we did that here in my neighborhood with me, my husband, my children. And I'm telling you, it changed our lives extensively.
That's amazing. I'm finding a common theme that it seems just starting with a conversation. And it's really the answer to that question. Just the conversation. It's really that simple.
Yes.
You've talked a lot, and you mentioned it a couple of times about diversity and inclusion. How do you think Black History Month contributes to our understanding and appreciation of diversity and inclusion in society?
Yeah, with the Black race, white race, and all this stuff, I think during like with all the activist movements, because we're still doing activism now and all that kind of stuff. But I believe, it was a start even then with that little girl, that 7-year-old Ayana, right? Just saying, they literally just went on a field trip up to New York and they saw Blacks and whites playing together, drinking from the same water fountain, juicing, and they were just like, it doesn't look quite like that for us down where we live in the South. So when I saw that, I was like, wow, that's very, very interesting. So they were already bringing about the diversity, the equity, and the inclusion just by sitting at that lunch counter, right? And we're still doing it even yet today. Because, America, we're a melting pot, right? So many races, so many cultures and subcultures within everything, right? We can learn so much. And the fact, like you said, the conversation that we're having today, I believe it brings it about even more so, right? So look at us, right? Our histories, our backgrounds, and things as such. We're making it happen right here on this platform so that other students, because Keiser is very diverse, is it not? It is. And so for now, other students to be able to hear the voice and to be able to to relate to that and be like, well, look at these two women from two totally different backgrounds, probably live in different areas of the country and so on and so forth. And we're here having a conversation and we are inclusive, right? No discrimination, no segregation. I have biases and preferences. We all do. We're human beings, right? But for me to say, no, you can't have this or I can't have that, we're not doing that. We're just having the conversation, objectively trying to understand, actively listen, and, come up with solutions like we're doing now. So I think this is a great platform. I'm just so excited that, you guys had me on and that you're even asking these engaging questions because they're important. And they're very important and they're very simple questions, right? And sometimes you have to kind of sit and think about it and be like, And so now, you got my wheels a turning.
Oh, no. I don't know if that's good or bad.
It's a great thing. It's a great thing. So I want to say thank you to you and to Keiser University for even putting this together to allow, again, a voice, right? A voice.
No, it's truly our pleasure. And I enjoy getting to hear these stories, whether it's listening to the podcast or being included in them, like we are here today. I know we're running out of time, but we've been talking about Black History Month. But I want to stop and I want to talk about you. So I am famous for asking this in new student orientation. I didn't have the chance to ask you this when you first started your program. So my question for you, and this is about you, is why? Why Keiser? Why your program? Why did you choose to pursue this path?
Excellent question. With the military, right, they help pay for our education. So I had earned money to continue my education. Now, I'm going to be really, really honest, so you guys don't judge me.
Uh-oh.
I didn't want to go back to school. I did it. But I had this money, I had earned this money, and it's either you use it or you lose it. And I already had a bachelor's, I already had an associate's, I had a master's, and I'm just like, I'm really schooled out. And so I was like, let's just continue to go. What's the next thing? And so I began to kind of research the field of IO, and I was like, I really like what I'm seeing here, right? Just how it's evolved over time and changed and all of those types of things. And I said, I think this is going to be something I could really, understand and enjoy and be able to give back. And being in the military, right? The military is it's a really big organization. And there are a lot of breakdowns. There are a lot of even injustice, let me just be real, within the military where things need to be changed, right? A voice needs to be heard. And let's just be honest, sometimes you cannot get into certain doors, right, without having those letters in front of your name or behind your name, right? It will kind of open up some doors for us. And so my biggest goal was to be able to get this degree so that I could walk into these places and people would hear my voice, right? Sometimes you got to play the game, right? You got to know who you're up against, right? And so if you have those credentials, behind your name, right, they may be willing to listen, right? So right now I'm that little 7-year-old girl, Ayana, right, with this voice. And Keiser, with the excellent education that this university has afforded me, is allowing me to be able to understand, and even when I graduate and get that doctorate degree, right, to be able to walk into that military organization, because that's the organization that I desire wholeheartedly to change because it can be better, right? And let them know the things that I've learned, the research that I've been in and all this stuff and studied, right? And how it can change this organization. And the fact that I've served as an active duty member, now I'm retired and also a spouse, right? I'm checking all the boxes there. We'll be able to do that. And especially as women, right? Because things are even different for us sometimes, right? So being able to walk into those doors and to be able to change things. Oh. Thank you for asking that question.
No, I'm so glad we had time to ask that question because talk about a hefty goal list. But what an amazing story, an amazing journey through your family, and then how that journey has impacted you and shaped your future. So, Ceandra, I want to thank you again, number one, for your service and dedication to this country. And thank you again for being able to connect with us today as we celebrate Black History Month and we learn a little bit more about each other. So thank you so much.
Always welcome. Always welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you for journeying with us today on Keiser Voices, the Story of Success. As we close this chapter, remember every story has its next page.